Thank you for joining Cancer Support Community Atlanta and Georgia Core for this partnered program, Spiritual Discovery in the Midst of Cancer, facilitated by Jeff Wright with Northside Hospital. Please visit Cancer Support Community Atlanta's website, cscatlanta.org, to see a complete list of the virtual programs offered. If this is your first time attending a Cancer Support Community Atlanta program, we invite you to complete a new attendee form to stay connected to all future events. Welcome everyone to today's program, Spiritual Discovery in the Midst of Cancer, featuring Jeff Wright with Northside Hospital. I'm Katie Armsby, the Program Outreach Director with Cancer Support Community Atlanta. Cancer Support Community Atlanta is excited to partner with Georgia Core for today's event, and you'll be hearing from Georgia Core's CEO and President, Lynn Durham, in just a bit. If this is your first time participating in a Cancer Support Community Atlanta program, we invite you to visit our website, cscatlanta.org, where you can see a complete list of the virtual oncology support programs offered. These include support groups, which are led by licensed mental health professionals, stress reduction classes like yoga and Tai Chi, a monthly nutrition seminar facilitated by Kristen Kukolowski with Northside Hospital Cancer Institute, and education programs like these. And if you ever miss a live event, you can find a recording of it under the video tab of our website. And again, that's cscatlanta.org. So I'm excited to welcome Lynn Durham, the CEO and President of Georgia Core, to introduce today's presenter.
Great. Thank you, Katie. I appreciate it. I am Lynn Durham. I'm the President and CEO of Georgia Core, which is the Georgia Center for Oncology Research and Education. And I want to just tell you a little bit about Georgia Core. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing cancer care through partnerships and innovation. We were founded in 2003 as a public-private partnership that would improve cancer care in our state by bringing in clinical trials and offering education and screenings and other measures to really make sure that you don't have to leave Georgia to get the best cancer care available in the nation. Tell you a little bit about our partnerships. We partner with hospitals, health systems, individual physicians, the state's 5 cancer coalitions, and other nonprofits to use education as a tool to educate about prevention, treatment, cancer screenings, and survivorship. We also work on innovation. And when we talk about innovation, we're talking about clinical trials. We attract cancer clinical trials to Georgia and administer those grants with our government partners. Right now, we are administering a grant with the State Department of Public Health for genomics. We also have one with the Centers for Disease Control for colorectal cancer screening. It is Colorectal Cancer Month this month, and the National Cancer Institute with Northside Hospital and with St. Joseph Candler in Savannah, where we bring hundreds of clinical trials all over the state: Valdosta, Rome, Gainesville, Columbus, Macon, Albany. We work very hard to bring clinical trials throughout the state. We also administer the funds that come in through the sale of the breast cancer license tag, which we are redesigning. If any of you have that tag or interested in, hopefully July 1, we'll have a new design with the pink ribbons that's more recognizable. And then we also are working with the legislature to have an all cancer tag, where funds from that, the sale of those tags, would help screenings for other cancers: lung, prostate, colorectal, other cancers. So we're busy at Georgia Core, but we love what we do, and I'm very happy to be here and to be part of this discussion. Now I want to introduce Jeff Wright. Jeff is a staff chaplain with Northside Hospital in Atlanta, where he provides spiritual care for oncology and critical care patients, their families, and the hospital staff. After many years of congregational ministry, Jeff decided to become a hospital chaplain following some meaningful experiences that he had championing with loved ones, with the congregation members through significant spiritual and health journeys. He earned a Master of Divinity degree from McAfee School of Theology at Mercer University and a Bachelor of Arts in Religion from Shorter College. He enjoys spending time with his wife, his 2 kids, and his 2 golden retrievers. Jeff, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time out on this afternoon to join this really important conversation. I appreciate that. And I also want to thank Katie Armsby and the Cancer Support Community of Atlanta, Katrina Davis and Lynn Durham and Georgia Core for putting all of this together And for all the great programs that they offer, I would encourage you to check out what they do offer and be a part of that as you find places of connection there. Let me do a little bit of a brief kind of walkthrough of what we'll talk about today. Of course, we're talking about spirituality and cancer, and the fact that sometimes those two things take up some of the same space. And so we're going to be looking at some of the ways that they connect and some of the things that we might experience going through something like a cancer diagnosis and life with cancer and spirituality as well. In particular, we'll look at what spirituality is. We'll also talk about how spirituality can help us and some of the challenges that we might experience with our spirituality. And some of those challenges can also be invitations to us. So we'll talk about that how transformation may take place in the midst of some of the things that we find ourselves up against. And moving into a deeper, more meaningful spirituality. That's one of the hopes I have for each of you. And also we'll talk about the support that we might find from companions that we have along the way. And then after that, we'll take some time for questions, and I will do the best I can to reply to every question that we can. And so just make note as you go through, if there's something that stands out to you or something you want to ask about, just make a little note and say that and put it in the chat. You can do it right then. And then we'll do our best to address your questions then. So I want to begin with a bit of an intention, really kind of an invitation in a sense. Above my desk is a poem by Marcina Werdiker, and it's been there for a few years now. And I still find a tremendous amount of meaning with it. So as we're talking about spirituality, I thought it would be helpful to kind of begin with this. There is a road that runs straight through your heart. Walk on it. To be a pilgrim means to be on the move, slowly. To notice your luggage becoming lighter. To be seeking for treasures that do not rust. To be comfortable with your heart's questions. To be moving toward the holy ground of home, with empty hands and bare feet. So what does it mean to be spiritual? There is a Dr. Christina Pachowski and others that she's worked with palliative care over the years, came up with this definition back in 2009. And in my setting as a chaplain at a hospital, I have found it incredibly helpful to think of spirituality in these terms. Spirituality is the aspect of humanity that refers to the way individuals seek and express meaning and purpose, the way they experience connectedness to the moment, to self, to others, to nature, and to the significant or sacred. So let me highlight a few things that we have there. First of which is that spirituality is an aspect of humanity. It's not always obvious to us. Sometimes it's something that we discover at some point in life, that there's a spirituality that we have. You can tell that you exist physically, but sometimes it's more of a challenge to understand how important your existence spiritually is to you as well. And I would argue that everybody, by nature of us being human, we all have a spirituality. We may use different words to talk about it and may understand that in radically different ways, but we're all seeking to express meaning and purpose. And we're all seeking to experience connectedness to something bigger than ourselves. So when we're talking about spirituality, that's essentially what I mean. Spirituality can take a lot of different forms. These can be shaped by our families, by our cultures, our religious traditions, our experiences, and everything else as a part of our life can be a part of our spirituality. And we might believe in very different things. Chances are, in a group the size of this one, a group more than two, we're going to have a lot of things that we're going to differ on about that. But I want to get at some of those things that we have in common when we're talking about spirituality and some of the ways that we express that. But I'm interested in you gaining understanding about your spirituality, you being as connected as possible to this very core part of who you are, and you finding meaning and purpose that sustains you and that helps you cope with and navigate your experiences with cancer and with every other part of your life in meaningful and helpful ways. So how does our spirituality help us? Well, I think some of what it can do for us is it helps us understand who we are. That question of identity is a very spiritual question. Who am I? It helps us clarify what matters to us. What are the things that are important in my life? What are the things I want my life to be made up of? It helps us find meaning, and it helps us grow into our sense of purpose. Those are very spiritual questions. Their purpose being, why am I here? What good can I do in the world around me? Is there something that I should be a part of in a way that connects me to others, that connects me to something bigger than myself? And that connection is crucial there as well. And it can be something not only to something that's big and transcendent, but also deeper connection to ourselves and understanding who we are. And finally, coping with our significant challenges and pain is another way that spirituality can help us. Richard Rohr is a Franciscan. I love it. Some of you may know who he is and have read some of his stuff. But one of the things that he says about this is that all great spirituality is about what we do with our pain. All great spirituality is about what we do with our pain. That's certainly not the only question that spirituality addresses, but it is in conversation with that. And I think any spirituality that's worth keeping is in conversation with that question of pain. What does it mean to suffer? What does it mean to exist in a way where we face challenges that we didn't anticipate coming, or that we wouldn't choose? Are there things where we can find meaning in the midst of that? So those are some of the things that spirituality can do for us. The next part is how can a cancer diagnosis affect spirituality? First, let me be very candid about this, that you know way more about this than I do. You know yourself and your own spirituality more intimately than I could imagine. And I think that that's something to acknowledge. But also, there are some things that I have observed in my time as a chaplain, in my own life, in my own experiences, and loss of people that have been close to me too, and in my own kind of little deaths along the way. And some of those things can be captured in a collection of words, of things that we might feel. You might feel a significant sense of loss. And all the things that you've heard about grief apply here. A lot of times we think of grief as only something that we go through when we experience a literal death, when someone close to us does, but there are so many ways that we grieve losses that we have throughout our lives. It can be a loss of sense of dreams and hopes. Some of the things we wanted to do that all of a sudden we can't do anymore. Or maybe some things that we were looking forward to that we're not going to be there for. It can also be a loss of a sense of self, or a loss of function, or loss of role, or anything like that. You may wrestle with questions like, who am I now that I have cancer? You may also ask, am I going to have to say goodbye to everyone I love, to the things I enjoy? Are they going to go on without me after I'm gone? Will I be remembered, and how? And sometimes people may ask a question like, why didn't I do more before this? You may feel angry, depressed, hopeless, and afraid. You may experience a radical and beautiful sense of clarity and gratitude. You may find meaning and comfort in spirituality, even if you've never been that spiritual before or felt like you were. You may also experience significant spiritual distress or a crisis of faith. Those are real things that we encounter. You may feel forsaken, forgotten, alone, like everything that you've ever believed doesn't work anymore or isn't even there anymore. You may ask, where is God now? Or what did I do to deserve this? And I think it's important to note that those are fair questions. And I find a lot of value in exploring those questions that we might not feel free to ask ourselves sometimes, much less others. But I think honesty is really important in spirituality, and in anything that we encounter in life, to be able to name what we're actually feeling and to put all of that up on the table and be able to go through that and sort through and gain insight and understanding and just acknowledge where things are. You may find yourself in a point where you have sort of what you would call a spiritual crash. And if that does happen, I don't want you to go through that alone. Reach out to somebody that you can talk to somebody close to you that you can share how you're feeling and what you're going through. There's risk in that, of course, but not as much as there is in not doing so. And I think if you're in the hospital and you would like to speak to a chaplain at Northside, we're there 24 hours a day. If you need somebody to talk with, just ask your nurse or anybody who works there, hey, could you ask the chaplain to come by and see me? And we'll make sure to do that. That's one of the main reasons that we're there. So know that that's a resource for you. You may experience all of the above and then some things that I haven't even imagined yet. Your list on a slide like this may have lots more words than I've put up here. And you might go through these things more than once. But as hard as it is, I want to reassure you that this can also be a pathway towards spiritual transformation. And let me show you what I mean. This is something that has popped up in a lot of different places. There are different ways that this is used, and a lot of different people have looked at the reality of some type of a transformation cycle here that we go through, where change happens in our lives. This one is kind of based on some work by Walter Brueggemann. The first top circle there, securely oriented. That's where everything is making sense at this point in your life. Things seem to be working for the most part. That might be some little inconveniences and whatnot that is there, but nothing too big is impacting your life. Work's probably going okay. Your relationships are fairly stable. Your health is stable. Things feel okay. But then you take that little pathway down that first arrow and you enter into an experience of being painfully disoriented. Something has threatened and interrupted the homeostasis that you felt in the beginning there. It could be your first diagnosis. It could be a relationship that really matters that's coming to an end or that's changing. It could be a change in something that you hold dear to you. Maybe it's your career where there's been a big shift, or maybe there's a car accident or anything like that that can just knock you off course. I see that second circle is almost like you're free falling, and everything that you would grab onto normally is not there, or you can't reach it, or it doesn't hold like it did before. That's a difficult place to be. But then over time, something might happen where you begin to see things that had been there all along that you couldn't see. Or maybe there are things that are new that you're beginning to see. New truths and insights that are helping you make sense of who you are and of your experiences and finding meaning and purpose. And that moves us into that circle of being surprisingly reoriented, of finding newness and finding, there's an increasing energy here of hopefulness and growth that's taking place over some very difficult things that you've been through. And then that gradually moves us back into being securely oriented with the benefit of the new things that we have learned and developed and the new insights that we have. Now, this is probably something that we repeat more than once in life, probably several times. But that's a helpful model for me, I think, when we're talking about spiritual transformation as to what can happen with some of the challenges that we face and some of the growth that can take place too. So the next part here is about discovering and deepening your spirituality. And I want to ask some questions that I hope will be helpful for you. I'd like for you to kind of make note if you want to write down your responses. And really the first thing that comes to mind is what I'd like for you to do. So you don't have to think too hard about it. Just think what pops in mind first, and write that down or remember that. When have you felt connected to something bigger than yourself? What was it? And how were you connected? What gives shape and meaning to your life? What are your anchor points? Those things that you can hold on to no matter what. What do you cling to when everything else around you comes crashing down? What is it that gives you hope? What's been meaningful to you in your past? Is there something there worth reconnecting to? And who in your life seems to have a healthy spirituality? Not who's the most religious person you know, but who seems to be grounded in a way that makes a difference in their lives and the lives of those around them. What is it about them that grounds them like that? And I want you to remember that whenever possible, it's important to seek out answers to questions like this a little more fully in the context of community. Others can help us gain insight and understanding that we can't find on our own. We can benefit from the collective wisdom that we share with people that we're connected to. Community is also an important check and balance for us. When we get off track a little bit, it can gently guide us back in. I think of taking my kids bowling and we put the bumpers up, probably more so for me than them. But that experience of rolling the ball down the lane and it starts to veer off to one side and there's something that bumps it back in toward the center. Those can be some benefits of being in community, being with people that care about you and that are looking out for your best interest there. And finally, with that, we look at companions on our journeys, people that remind us that we're not alone. I don't know if you know much about redwood trees in California, but there's some fascinating stuff about these trees. But one of the things that stands out to me is that they grow on the western side of the Sierra Nevada mountains. And they're giant trees, immensely tall and just large trees. And you would think that because of that, they would have root systems that were kind of matching, that would be deep and just as strong as they seem to be on top. But their root systems are actually relatively shallow for the size tree that they are. But what happens is underneath the surface, they connect with each other. The root systems of one tree will connect and intertwine with the roots of the trees around it. And they form this kind of network there. And so when a storm comes in off the Pacific and heavy winds are there, they can bend and sway, but still hold each other up with that. So that's a helpful metaphor, I think, for understanding what it means to be in community and to have people around you who care about you and who share some of the things of spirituality that matter to you. And it takes a lifetime to build that. Oftentimes we're gifted with that at various points in life, but try to hold together some of those points of connection for you. There's several, I've got a few categories here of how I would look at these points of connection, these companions for us. The first is family and friends. Probably some of the most important relationships that we have. These are the people that know you better than anybody. These are the people that have been with you through a lot of things that you've experienced. And I wonder what it would be like to invite them into what you're going through. If you're having some difficulty, or if there's something that you're finding tremendous joy right now, what would it be like to invite the people closest to you into that? And I know that's a risk, but to be able to share your spirituality, your hopes, your fears about what matters most to you and hear those things from them too, could be a life-giving experience for you. And so I would encourage you to reach there. The second place is with faith communities. Faith communities provide a setting for support for you as you seek meaning and purpose and connection. It's people on the same path as you. Nobody's got it quite figured out, but we're kind of walking along together in this, trying to help each other along the way and trying to seek out things, not just as individuals, but also collectively. In my experience, the best faith communities that you can find are the ones who rarely have all the answers. But if you can find a faith community that will sit with you in your faith and in your doubt and provide love and support and comfort and hope and encouragement through that, that's a really good place to be. Another aspect of this is that faith communities also provide a place for you to live out your faith in meaningful ways. This can be through the relationships that you have with the people there. It can be through spiritual practices like prayer and worship and other things that you do. It can also be through service to those around your community. Together, you can do things that you couldn't do on your own. And you've got so much to offer, and collectively that multiplies more than it adds. I do want to say be safe about this right now, just to give that note. Just with where we are with the pandemic, and also with the possibility of a pretty significant changes with your own immune systems. So I want you to be mindful of that. I know you're cautious, but just another encouragement there to do that. A third part of this are spiritual professionals. This can be clergy and rabbis and imams, spiritual teachers, chaplains, spiritual directors, anybody along that line that fits in that category. These are going to be people who have dedicated their lives to seeking truth and transformation, and who will be companions with you in that process for yourself as well. They pursued specialized training in their respective religious and spiritual traditions, and they should be able to listen effectively and with a great deal of care and provide spiritual support and guidance for you. They should also be equipped to help you find meaningful ways to connect your experiences with your faith, or to see where those connections are already at place. Some other connections I would like to share with you. For those of you who like to listen to things, there is a really wonderful podcast that you can get at any of the places where you find podcasts, called Everything Happens with Kate Bowler. Kate, when she was 35, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. She is a young mother, a writer, a professor at Duke Divinity School. And through this podcast, she joins with other people and has, an hour or so long conversation about some of the things that they have discovered in their lives. It's really a wonderful and hopeful podcast. So I encourage you to check that out. And if you like to read more than listen, I think there's also a book that she has written called Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I Have Believed. We encourage you to check that out. And Christian Wyman, he has a book called My Bright Abyss. Christian was on his 39th birthday, was diagnosed with cancer. He's a poet, a writer, a teacher, and a lecturer. And he began this process of taking some of who he was and exploring deeply into his own spirituality with what he was experiencing with his cancer diagnosis, and with the illness and with treatments and with the way his perceptions about things had changed. It's a very, very honest look at spirituality, and would encourage you to check that out too. Of course, there are lots of other things out there, but those are just two that came to mind that I wanted to share with you. And I also want to say, don't forget to live. You are still alive after all. And don't ever forget that. Do something fun. Come up for air every once in a while. Some of the stuff we talked about is really heavy stuff. And it's important to go there too, but it's also important to have some of the light that can come in through looking at the upside of your spirituality, through looking up as well. So I want to encourage you to do that. So I hope you have had some things here that have been helpful as we've talked through this. I want to take some time now for us to move into our question and hopefully answer segment of our conversation. So I'm going to invite Katie back in for that part of our talk.
Thank you, Jeff. I think there's a lot of great information, and I really love the tree analogy. I think that's such a beautiful depiction. So we did get a few questions coming in, and I want to invite everyone again to enter some questions into the program chat box, and Jeff and I can get those addressed. One question that came in was, I'm not a traditionally religious person, but would like to connect to a community of spirituality. Could a non-denominational church be a good fit for this, or do you have any other suggestions?
I think it would, it could be. I think it's important to explore kind of non-denominational means a lot of different things. Within the context of Christianity, for instance, there's a non-denominational church that kind of, in a sense, functions like a denomination. So it'd be important to know that not every time that you see non-denominational does it actually mean what you might be thinking. But there are organizations and groups in spiritual centers that are outside of some traditional religious expressions that might be something you would want to look at. You also might find some really important connections and meaningful connections with some things that maybe you haven't experienced before that might be worth exploring. I think it's important to really get in touch with what you value and to do a little research and find out, is there a place that has some of these same things where there's some resonance that I can grow in, but I can also be myself as fully as possible here. And finding those connections now is, we're so adept at searching things out on the internet now, especially through this, like we're doing so many virtual meetings. That can be a really helpful way to explore it. You can be a part of something that isn't even close by where you are geographically, but might meet a need for you that you can't find close by to where you are. But I think ideally, being able to be physically present with other people that share in something that you hold dear can be a really helpful way of finding a spiritual home for you.
Okay, great. Another question we had, I struggle with my cancer diagnosis and the traditional thought of it being, everything has a plan. I think kind of what you're talking about with that podcast and the book, Everything Happens for a Reason. Do you have any tips on how to stay faithful to my religion or spirituality during this time?
I think going back to that model of spiritual transformation that we talked about, you're living that if that's what's happening to you. And with that, there are going to be some things that it's okay to let go of. Some of our ideas and beliefs that maybe aren't as true as we thought they were, but we may find that some others are more true than we thought they were. And there is I think within any spiritual tradition, there is a process of refining, a process of becoming more fully who you are and growing an understanding of who God is, or who, that takes time, that takes some challenge, that takes some painful changes there. But it can also be such an enriching experience to move into something that, and let go of some things that maybe were not healthy ideas for you. My own theology around that is not that, if this is helpful to you, not that God necessarily causes everything to happen, but that we are not alone in what we go through. And that there is some way of that being true, that there are things that happen that aren't necessarily planned, but that there can be renewal and clarity and new life that we can experience in seeing how we're not alone going through the difficulties that we face.
Great. It sounds like a couple of those resources you shared were probably good places to find people who, like you said, you're not alone with, so you can identify. Yeah. This is a question that came in from a healthcare professional perspective. In my role, I visit patients daily on the oncology unit, and I struggle with their fear of dying when they express their fear of dying. Is there a way that I can help guide them, or is there something to say to help them in that moment?
I think it might be helpful to just acknowledge, first off, their fear. Acknowledge that it's something they may have questions about. What's it gonna be like to die? They may have questions about, are you gonna keep me from suffering through this process? They may have questions that are existential in nature. What happens after I die? And I think it's okay to acknowledge that discomfort, but then also to maybe say, what do you believe about that? What do you hope for here? Is there anything that you can cling to? Does something give you hope in this time? So rather than providing a kind of an answer that may or may not be as beneficial, it is making some space for what they're feeling, and honoring that in them, but then also asking them, are there things that could be helpful to you here? And then those would be some great ways to approach that, I think.
Yeah, and I think a universal fear and probably a conversation that should happen even outside the world of oncology, something I think everyone thinks about for sure.
Yeah.
And your answer might be a little bit the same for this one. This is coming from a family member's perspective. As a family member to someone who has had cancer, I guess, return, is there anything to help them spiritually at this point? It might be a similar answer to the last one.
It is, but I think one of the things that when you first get a diagnosis of cancer, you become acutely aware of your own mortality, and of the mortality of those around you. If you're a caregiver, it becomes something that is just front and center for you, more so than it can be for a lot of other people. There's certainly other experiences that can take us to that space too. But I think it can be helpful to take a step into that rather than to run from it, and to think about, okay, what are the things that hold me up here? Who are the people that I'm with? Are there things places I might find gratitude? And not to diminish the struggle that we face when we come to the reality that we thought we beat something, and here it is coming again. I mean, waiting for the other shoe to fall, I think, is something that every cancer patient always deals with. Some deal with it in very different ways. Some people really lean into their spiritual tradition, into their faith, and find hope in things that are transcending and that are beyond even this life. If there's something like that that's meaningful to you, I would encourage you to get really clear about what that is, to dig in and be able to build up that part of yourself, to experience grace and life and fullness in every moment that you have as much as possible. There is a little cartoon I have on my desk that's a Peanuts cartoon. I don't think it actually was. I think somebody made a meme out of it, but it says, Charlie Brown is sitting next to Snoopy, and he says, Snoopy, one day we're all going to die. And Snoopy's response is, yes, but until then, we're going to live. And so that reality of the gift that you have in the present moment and focusing on presence, I think, is critical here. Not worrying about what might happen or how it might happen entirely. That's certainly going to be a part of your thoughts and your feelings there, but also being able to get to a point where, and it's not always easy to do, and I don't want to pretend like it is, but if you can get to that gifted space where you can value this moment that you have right now, I think that could be a helpful component of your spirituality during that time of dealing with a new diagnosis or a recurring diagnosis.
Thank you. I know sometimes it's hard to be in the present with so much going on, but I think that is such important advice.
And I think utilizing some of the tools that we talked about earlier about connecting with other people and can be one way where you can find some support in that journey. Get some people to shine a little light in some places that feel very dark to you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this question is kind of related also to COVID-19, because I think we're all sort of in this boat, but I'm unable to attend church activities and miss the social support that comes with it. Do you have any suggestions on how to stay connected?
I think it takes a lot more energy now to do that. When pre-COVID, you could go and as long as you weren't your immune system wasn't too compromised, you go and you see people, and that happens kind of along the way, just a byproduct of you being with them. And now I think it's more important to be more intentional about reaching out. And I think one of the things that can happen is picking up the phone and calling some people that you haven't talked to in a while, that you've missed. Having a conversation, maybe trying to have one a week or so, and say, hey, I want to call somebody this week from this group I was a part of, that we've been apart through this, and I just want to check in on them and just reconnect. There's a lot of virtual ways to do that too. We're at a point where we have tremendous technology that helps us be able to do things that we couldn't have done before. But any way that you can put that effort in to connect and reconnect with people, I think can be a great benefit there. Otherwise, it's easy to feel kind of like we're on our own. And I don't want any of you to have to go through that experience without being able to connect to other people that can be a support to you.
Going back to the importance of that root system.
Yeah.
And this question is from the perspective of a family member. Is there any way to spiritually, I guess, deal with or help cope with supporting or caregiving a person who has been diagnosed with cancer?
I think one of the things is acknowledging that most of your energy probably goes toward providing that care for your loved one. But there's also times when you need to reach out and find some space of your own, in a sense, that maybe runs parallel to what they're going through, but trying to have a network of people, if at all possible, where you're not the only one who's there providing physical and emotional and spiritual support, but that there are other people who can step in and do some of that, but then also seeking out that for yourself. You need it so much going through this, because you don't want to get to a point where everything is so run down that it's hard to even figure out how to take a next step. And so much of that experience is going to make you feel that way. But any way that you can carve out a little time, even if it's a few minutes in the morning before anybody else is awake, or just taking some time to develop and learn about maybe some things that could be helpful to you just throughout the day. Breath work can be a tremendously different thing, a helpful thing through this. And what I mean by that is just taking a minute to breathe deeply. It doesn't have to take long, but to just be able to take just a second where instead of breathing from right up here, you're breathing from the bottom of your lungs, where your body begins to relax a little bit more and you begin to open up a little bit more. Trying to find some practices like that can be helpful, that either are spiritual practices or connected to spiritual practices. There's a whole bunch of things like that you could do. But that's one thing that I might recommend, and just making sure that you set aside some space and time for yourself as a caregiver to be able to tend to the things that really matter for you also.
Very true. It's hard to care for others when you're unable to care for yourself, to fill yourself up that way. So I think that's all for our questions that we had come in. Oh, we do have one more question.
Okay.
Actually, a couple. One, how can someone connect to a chaplain at Northside? And I guess, can you talk a little bit about their role?
We have a secret layer that nobody knows. It's actually really easy. A lot of times we've been through COVID, we've been really not as present as we typically are, but typically we're very present on the floors of the hospitals. And a lot of times we round and we'll go visit patients. And those pathways are opening to that again, where we'll be more present than we have been. So anytime that you see us and we stop by, if it's not a good time, tell us and we'll be glad to come back another time. But also, anytime that you just want to talk to somebody, you can ask your nurse or ask the tech that comes in the room or anybody in there. Or pick up the if you can handle the phone there, you can always ask the unit control specialist there to call a chaplain. And just like you would pick up for help and just say, "Can you call a chaplain? I'd really like to talk to somebody." And somebody will get there. At Northside Atlanta, we are there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I tell people, even on Groundhog Day, we're there. There's always somebody available for that. And we would love to be a part of providing some care and support for you anytime that you need it.
Great, thank you. We did have someone ask, can a Northside patient or someone who was previously treated at Northside and is at home still connect with an oncology chaplain?
You could always reach out to us. It's a little bit trickier because most of our focus is placed on patient care and family care and staff there within the hospital. And it's difficult for us to not have some parameters there. However, if there is something that you'd like some help with, feel free to call our chaplaincy department. I'll give you the telephone number. It's 404-851-4670. Or you can call the main line at the hospital and ask to speak to a chaplain or to the Spiritual Health and Education Department. And somebody there will get back in touch with you. If you just have a question or want to talk through a couple of things, that might be a good way to reach out to us. So that is available there to you. You can also send an email. My email is jeff.wright, it's WRIGHT, at northside.com. And we have a whole team of chaplains there as well. We're lucky to have the benefit of some seasoned staff chaplains, as well as a great team of residents who are in training right now to be chaplains. So that's some of the work that we have there. It's a resource for you at Northside. So feel free to reach out if we can help you.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Jeff. And we do have a question I'm going to bring Lynn in for on this one. Someone asked how they could get more information on Georgia Core. Lynn, I'm guessing it's directing people to your website, georgiacancerinfo.org, but I will let you chime in if there's any additional places that people can connect with Georgia Core.
Thank you very much, Katie. Yes, absolutely. georgiacancerinfo.org is definitely the best way. We have information about Georgia Core, but also just about many different programs that are going on throughout the state. So you can check there first. If you have a specific question for us, you can send an email to info@georgiacancerinfo.org, and we can answer your question that way. My email address is ldurham@georgiacore.org. So happy to help you any way we can, but we do have a great deal of information on our website, and you can start there.
Great, thank you. And as we wrap up, I will bring Jeff back in. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with the group?
I just want to thank you all again for your time, for taking the time to be here and for your interest in this. I think it's a really important topic. And I know that in some ways we probably just scratched the surface of that today. But I hope that it gets us all kind of thinking through about how do we connect to the things that matter most to us, that give us hope, that give us meaning, and that give shape to our lives. And any way that we can help you do that as chaplains and the other resources I've shared about too. Don't be shy about reaching out for those also. Thank you so much for doing that. I wish you blessings and peace now and always. And thanks again. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff, for such great information. Thank you, everybody, for participating in today's program. And I want to share a special thank you with Georgia Core for partnering with us on today's event. For more information on Georgia Core, you can visit their website, georgiacancerinfo.org. And for more information about Cancer Support Community Atlanta, or to find a recording of today's event, you can visit our website, cscatlanta.org. All right. Thank you, everybody, again. We hope to see you soon. Take care.
Thank you for joining Cancer Support Community Atlanta for this program. If you're interested in other live or recorded programs, please visit the online program tab of our website, cscatlanta.org. Or follow us on Facebook. We'll be sharing additional information on upcoming programs.